Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back here. I also have a long history in Boston. I went to Boston College, was a student government leader and then an anti-war leader. So I've been organizing most of my adult life. And I relish the opportunity to organize around this issue. I've been doing it in Washington for almost 35 years, but now we have this new phenomenon, this new mass movement that has arisen that is unlike any movement I've seen before in this country. It is deeper, it is broader, it is newer, it is spontaneous, and it is emerging all over the country. And the people that are interested in taking to the streets to speak out for women's rights and human rights and labor rights are also interested in the issues of war and peace. And that's what makes this nuclear issue so relevant for this moment. Because while we can talk about the waste that's the trillion-dollar triad will generate, while we can talk about how nuts the people are who would advocate these new weapons and these new missions for these weapons, it's really what's happened since Donald Trump's election that is motivating this movement, that is grabbing people's attention, unlike any other period that I've seen. On April 15th, a whole lot of us thought we were going to go to war. That's when Kim Jong-un said he was going to test a nuclear test, or perhaps a ballistic missile test. And the President of the United States said he had sent an armada down to the coast of Korea. And it looked like we were heading for conflict. We dodged that nuclear bullet, but that crisis isn't over. So to help us understand this, what we're up against, where we are now, let me just give a quick 10-minute speech. I haven't given this talk before. I just made it up this morning. I'm calling it the Three Crazies. The Three Crazies. To understand where we are. And the first crazy is the President of the United States. Now, this is a topic that is being approached quite gingerly in the public discourse. You see some people say it. Joe Scarborough, he's not crazy like a fox. He's just crazy. He's separated from reality. George Will, if you haven't read this column from 2 days ago, go read this column. The President of the United States, he has a dangerous disability, he says. He does not know what it's like to know something. For all of you who've been studying epistemology in college, we're talking about the essence. What is knowledge? How do we know something? The President of the United States does not seem to know anything. And I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I just want to let you know that in dinner conversations in Washington, in ways that people wouldn't say in public, there is a consensus that the President of the United States is crazy. That one of the reasons that Jared and Ivanka and others are there are to control him, to steer him, to monitor him. You let him out for too long, and bizarre things start to happen, right? Okay, so then you couple this with the unnerving fact that the President of the United States is the only person who has the authority to launch a nuclear weapon. And once he gives the order, that order cannot be countermanded. That's why a military officer follows him around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Can't be more than 1 minute from him. When the President is sleeping, he's outside the bedroom. When the President is golfing, he's in a golf cart behind him. When the President goes into an elevator, the officer gets into the elevator with him. He's right there because he has the command and control football, the nuclear football. You open it up, and there are the options, there are the codes, there are the things that the President can do, and he can give that order at any time. We don't have to be under attack for him to do this. It's his authority. We call the nuclear weapons the President's weapons. And once he gives the order, no one can countermand him. There is no meeting of the cabinet. There is no meeting of the Joint Chiefs. There is no time to appeal something to the Supreme Court. No, it's gone. And 4 minutes after he gives the order, missiles go flying. We have about 400 ICBMs in silos scattered across the Great Plains from North Dakota to Montana. Each carries a warhead 20 times the power of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. We have 5 submarine-launched ballistic missiles on high alert at all times into the oceans. They have another 460 warheads, each of those 30 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. So you have a total of about 500 missiles with 860 warheads with the equivalent of 15,000 Hiroshimas. You do that, you launch that force, you destroy everything that humanity has created over the millennia. As Richard Nixon says, I can go into my office, pick up the phone, and in 30 minutes, 70 million people would be dead. That is an underestimate now. You would kill billions of people. And the president alone has that order. And what's encouraged, so the first crazy is the problem we have in the Oval Office. The second crazy is the policy itself. Why on earth do we have a policy that crazy? Why does one human being have the authority to kill all other human beings within 30 minutes? It is insane. Fortunately, you're getting reactions to this. Some of it Massachusetts-led. I was just at a press conference 2 days ago in the Capitol with Senator Ed Markey and Senator Ted Lieu, a rising star. And both of them have introduced a bill to restrict the president's first use of nuclear weapons, to say, no, Congress has the authority to declare war. And that shouldn't matter when it's the most important war of all, a nuclear war. You want to be the first to use a nuclear weapon, Mr. President, you have to come to Congress and get authorization. We now have 34 co-sponsors on that bill in the House and Senate. So it's a piece of legislation that's actually moving. So when you hear about Markey Lieu, that is not a filly running in the Kentucky Derby today. Markey Lieu is probably one of the most important pieces of legislation we can promote here. Will it pass this Republican-controlled Congress? No, but we want to increase the attention to it. We want to increase support for it. A number of organizations that we work with, the Ploughshares funds, are talking about doing what you guys are doing here, going to the municipal level, getting city councils and state legislatures to pass language on this. If you can't get it done through Congress, let's get it done outside Congress. Let's build up that kind of support. And finally, the third crazy. The third crazy are the people that are crazy that are not us. And we have to understand that there are dangerous, unstable people out there who would use nuclear weapons if they could. And you can start with Kim Jong-un. Would he use a nuclear weapon? I think he might. This is not just about deterrence for them. If ISIS got a nuclear weapon, would they use it? I think they would. So you have problems of nuclear weapons spreading around the world, and that relates directly to the size of our arsenal. You cannot convince people to shrink their arsenals as long as the U.S. continues to grow, as long as we say we have to spend $1 trillion over the next 25 years for new and better and more capable weapons, and keep designing new targets and new missions for them. Of course other countries are going to do it. So what we do on our disarmament level affects what other countries do, what other groups do, the availability of ISIS to get a weapon. And finally, you have to understand the situation in South Asia, another crazy situation where two nuclear-armed rivals are squaring off each other. People are dying on the India-Pakistan border every day. There was a hot fight going on over Kashmir now, this week, this month. They both have 120 nuclear weapons. That fight could escalate. And if it does get into a battle between the two armies, almost every war game that's ever been played about conventional conflict in South Asia over the last 20 years goes nuclear. There's no reason to doubt that they won't. So we have those three crazy problems: our president, our policy, the others out in the world. I'm optimistic that we can do something about it, not because I see rational thinking returning to Washington, but because I see this mass movement growing on in the world. And as you said, Jonathan, it's our job to understand the intersectionality of our issues and the movement's issues, to bring them to be one and the same. As Kamala Harris said at the Women's March, January 21st, which began this upsurge, you want to talk about women's issues? Let's talk about national security. That's a woman's issue. And that's the kind of attitude we need to foster, we need to do to find the alliance to turn this mass movement into a force that can change not just nuclear policy, but the United States of America. Thank you very much.
One of the things that has kept me somewhat sane about this whole issue is the sense, and I don't know I'm sure no one can prove it, is that someone like Secretary of Defense Mattis has already made arrangements, just the way Haig did during the Watergate crisis, to order other people in the top levels not to follow any orders from the lunatic in the Oval Office. Now, I know you can't possibly know whether or not that's been set up, but what does your gut tell you about that?
My gut tells me no, and here's why. The only parallel situation to the one we're currently in was in the last few weeks of the Nixon administration, when under impeachment threat, Nixon was drinking heavily, and this is well documented, drinking heavily and wandering the halls of the White House at night, talking to portraits on the wall. And at that moment, I talked to portraits on the wall. Secretary of Defense Jim Schlesinger, it wasn't Haig.
Oh, sorry.
Schlesinger told the officers, including the nuclear officer carrying the nuclear football, if the president gives you an order, check with me first. Now, that is unconstitutional.
Right.
That is illegal. He cannot do that. I think we're all glad that we did, but it was under extremists. I doubt very much that the Secretary of Defense is saying that now, at this moment. If the president heard about that, I think the Secretary of Defense would lose his job. So I just don't think that's happening. Remember, the chain of command doesn't have to include the Secretary of Defense. It's the president that gives the order. If the Secretary of Defense is available, the chain goes through the Secretary of Defense to the commander of the military force to the launch officers. But you don't need, the only one you need in that chain is the president.
Well, my gut tells me that Mattis wouldn't have taken the job unless he felt he could do that. But of course, it's completely unprovable. He seems very level-headed, that guy.
He is, and we're lucky he's there.
Right.
I know Jim Mattis. I've met Jim Mattis. He's a good man, and he's our circuit breaker. But there's no guarantee, and he doesn't have control. Right. I mean, you remember the Saturday Night Massacre under Nixon, when the Attorney General, he told him to fire the special prosecutor, and Attorney Elliot Richardson, a Massachusetts man, resigned. Well, then they put the second in command in. He refused. They fired him. They got the third guy. He gave the order. That's pretty much the situation you have. You have to remember, the President of the United States is the President of the United States, and everybody else works for him.
One other quick question.
Yeah.
Does the Markey-Liu bill include an order that might occur during a launch on warning situation?
No, it's only the first use. So it doesn't take away the ability of the President to launch after we've been attacked.
Well, but radars might, a radar might.
So under attack, no, it doesn't. It doesn't include that, which is a risk in itself. But in order to even get a chance of having this bill being considered, they had to limit it. Thank you.
Someone else? Come to the mic.
And I don't know if Markey-Liu is exactly the answer or not, but what's so important is you see leading political figures endorsing this, pushing this. So one thing we could all do is encourage the other members, there are people who work for us, to get on board and endorse this bill as well.
Hi. Can we look at any of the other nations that have nuclear weapons to see if there's a better safeguard on launch codes?
Russia has almost the same plan, so does the UK, so does France. So they all have a modified form of alert. Russia's almost identical to ours. They also have about 800 warheads on hair trigger alert, which is the problem. The country actually with some of the best is India and Pakistan, which stores their weapons unassembled. So it's not a hair trigger. I mean, it takes hours or days to be able to put your nuclear weapons in place. But as tensions increase, both those countries are reconsidering their doctrines and therefore reconsidering their deployment options. The key thing that we could do is to do something like that. One, take our nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. This is a Cold War anachronism. Take them down so it takes hours or days to launch, and even getting to the point where you take the warheads off the missiles. So then you really are preventing an accidental launch or a launch under a miscalculation. Thank you.